Hey guys, welcome to another video. Thanks for tuning into this one. I hope that you guys are having a great day wherever you are in the world. I'm really grateful to all of you that have subscribed to the channel. I'm grateful to all your questions, all your comments, all your feedback. All that stuff is really good. And I hope to continue to give you this information, hopefully to assist you in making better decisions in your career, at least in your aspiration to become a pilot. And I hope to be able to guide you in that direction, because that's the ultimate goal. Now, in this particular video, I want to address a lot of questions that I've received when it comes to choosing a flight school. I get a lot of you guys that reach out to me asking questions about, what to consider and how to go about choosing this flight school. Now, on my channel, we focus a lot on helping you achieve your goal, whether that is finding a sponsored program, whether that is through a cadet program, whether that is through scholarships. Those are the ways in which you can hopefully become a pilot, right? You can make use of those opportunities to achieve your goal. And that's what I cover here. Now, so in this particular video, I really want to talk on some of the things you should consider when you want to choose a flight school, whether it's through a sponsored program or not. This may be applicable to you depending on where you are, and this would also benefit those of you that are international students as well, because I've really gone into to cover that as well. I was an international student. I trained in the United States. I've been flying for the airlines for over, it's almost 10 years now, and I have, I went through being a student, transition from a student to working in the US, all that stuff. So I know what you may be going through or you're about to go through. And considering it's coming from someone that has done it before, I think it makes it much more relatable. This is not just something I read on the internet. This is something I actually experienced. And I do have a lot of people that are going through it, that have gone through it. And, that experience really goes a long way. So that's why I'm bringing it to you. So if you haven't subscribed yet, of course, feel free to subscribe. If you don't subscribe, that's fine as well. But I hope that you benefit from this video. So let's talk about some of the important things here. I do have this fancy thing that I've thrown out here. I hope it helps to just make it clear. And the first thing that I want you to consider is this. When you are choosing a flight school, you have to think about your goals. Consider your goals. What are your goals that you are trying to achieve? What airline do you want to work for? What are your plans when you complete your training? Because that will determine how you go about achieving your pilot goals. For example, if you're an international student, do you want to stay in your country and train to become a pilot so that you can fly in your country? Or if you're somebody that wants to fly overseas and different countries, then how are you able to get all the requirements, get the necessary experience to achieve that desired goal? For me, I started out of Nigeria. I was in Nigeria. I did my bachelor's degree over there. And then I moved over to the United States to do my training after I finished my bachelor's in Nigeria. And then I completed my training. And then I had to consider my options. Do I want to stay in the US? Do I want to go back to Nigeria? Now, depending on what you choose to do, if you choose to stay, you'd have to jump through some hurdles as well. As you know, there are some requirements as an international student for you to go back to your country. And I'm going to cover that as well as we continue. But the point here is knowing what your goals are would help you to decide on where to go. If your goal is to train to become a pilot and you don't care where you fly, then you should, plan based on that. Now, because like I said, once you decide on your goals, one of the things you consider is where do you want to fly, right? Do you want to fly in Nigeria? Or do you want to fly in your country? Do you want to fly in the US? Do you want to fly in wherever? That will determine what you do. Because if you want to fly, if you want to have options, right, then it's always good to have options. That means you want to go to a place that will help you get all the necessary ratings, but at the same time, you have the option to either leave or stay. That is very important, because if you do it in a place where you end up getting your ratings and you have no other option but to fly in that country, what if there are limited opportunities in that country? You probably don't want that. You want to have options. So, of course, consider your options in this whole decision-making process, right? Now, whatever you do, right, if you choose to fly in your country or not, you can see for both of them, the outcome will be the same. And let me move this over here so that you can see it better. Your experience requirements will be different. For example, If you choose to fly in a place like Nigeria, the minimum requirement is around 250 hours. But would you get a job with 250 hours? Probably not. And that also goes along with people in Europe as well, or other parts of the world. Sometimes the minimum is stated just as a minimum, but that doesn't mean that you want to have that. So depending on what you do, so let's assume that you're choosing to fly in your country, your experience requirements will come in handy. Your age requirements will be important as well, because some airlines do have minimum age requirements, maximum age requirements that you need to meet. What about the license, right? What licenses would you need? That means, would you need to convert to your local license, right? Because if you train in the US, you get an FAA license. If you train in the UK, you get a CAA. If you train in Europe, you get an EASA. It goes on, there's so many licenses out there because every regulating agency has its own. And your goal would be to be able to get the license, find a way to convert it to your local license, depending on if you choose to stay in your country or you choose to leave to fly in a different place. You have to consider those things. Now, I don't want you to get overwhelmed by these processes, but these are things that you should have at the back of your mind. The first goal in any case is always to at least get started with the training, get your returns done, But it's always good to have this in the back of your mind as you embark on this journey. Some airlines will have age requirements, medical requirements, of course, as a pilot. That's one of the big things. You have to get your heights done, hearing tests, all those things, right? Those are things that you have to meet with an AME or aviation medical examiner to go over with you. Then, of course, educational requirements. Some airlines will require that you have certain minimum education requirements, or even flight schools will have educational requirements as well. So you have to know, based on where you are, where you want to fly, these things will be different. And this is where I said your options, right? For the options as well, you have to know what their experience requirements are. For example, if you're going to fly in the US, the minimum to get into one of these airlines is about 1,500 hours to start out after you finish the flight school. Now, do you have to have 1,500 hours to get a professional flying job? No. But to fly with the airlines, you need that 1,500 hours. All right. So depending on the options you have, again, flying for the airlines is an option. Flying for a charter operations is an option. Flying somebody, right? Somebody may need a pilot and they will just hire you with your minimum hours is an option. Agricultural purposes, people flying, crop dusting, fertilizer spraying, things like that. Those are all options that are available depending on what your goals are. But that's why I said consider your goals. All right. That's why I started with that. The next thing that you want to move on to is to consider your finances. As we know, flight training is quite expensive. And if you could decide on how much you can afford and you have that number down, then you're able to tailor your search. All right. Because the search will be the flight school, finding a school. But one thing to remember is that when you consider your finances, you need to understand that you do not need to have the full amount. And I'm going to switch this so that you can see my face well. All right. A lot of people always think, oh, you need $80,000 to train, and that means you have to go get $80,000 to start. That is not true. Okay. And I'm going to go over that in details when you choose your flight school, because when you're considering your finances, generally you want to consider how much you need to start, but how you're able to then sustain the process. That is important. But you don't need to have everything to start. I mean, unless you are super wealthy, that you have 80,000 lying around, majority of people don't have that. So, and if these flight schools understand that, the embassy understands that as well. And that's why you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you need to have everything to get started. So let me switch back to this one here. Now, how much does it cost? All right. Once you figure that amount out, which generally speaking, maybe this should have come first. For example, are you going through a self-sponsored route? Is it going to be a partially funded sponsored route? Or is it like a cadet program that I talk about on this channel as well? But in addition to all of that, you also need to think about the accommodation requirements, right? Transportation to get around, fees or check ride fees, materials, books, all those extra stuff that you have to pay for that they don't generally state them in the tuition cost. You need to put that in mind. And of course, surcharges. For example, if you do have, you're renting an airplane, fuel surcharge, things like that can come up. And that's why when you're starting your training, you always have to think about how it could, your cost of training could change over time. Just because the flight school quotes you $80,000 doesn't mean that that's exactly what you would use. Generally speaking, you may use that at a minimum, but you're likely to exceed that, because if you show up to the flight school or show up to training one day and the airplane is down or the weather is bad, you may still have to pay for the instructor's time, right? Because the instructor still shows up, and again, every flight school is different, but it's something that you need to consider. And that's why, always budget 10% more, 20% more to cover the cost. All right. The cost is very important. Like I said, it's always the biggest part. And this is one of the barriers into aviation industry. And that's why finding scholarships, finding career programs, finding partially sponsored programs, all of those things are things that I cover on this channel. So like I said, if you're interested in those, I try to cover them and I share them with you guys so that you guys can learn from this. Then the last thing that I have here, all right, is find a school. You have to find a school that suits you, okay? For example, like I mentioned at the beginning, if I go back here, if you consider your goals and you want to fly in your country, then after considering your finances, finding a school means that you find a school within your country. On the other hand, if you are an international or you're somebody that has found a school, or you're considering doing your training in a different country, then you have to find a school in a new country and see what works in terms of, can you actually go to that school? And that's where the student type comes in important, right? Student type, you have two options here. You can either be a citizen, a national, or international student. If you're a citizen of the country, maybe I can just say citizen, for example, you may not need to have certain requirements, right? You may not need to have to meet certain requirements for that airline, for the necessary documents that you need to train at that school, at the flight school. If you're an international student, then you have to then meet certain visa requirements, document requirements, and those can be complicated. They can be expensive. It can be a long process. I'm sure most of you that are international students are familiar with some of this that I'm talking about. Now, for either case, for either person or either one of these two options here, you always have to consider, of course, safety first. Okay, I always say that safety first when you're choosing a flight school. Don't just go by the cheapest school, but think about safety. All right. The next thing is the fleet size. Think about fleet size as the ability of the school to actually handle the number of students that they have. If they have limited airplanes, that means the airplanes are busy. You may not have a lot of options on when to fly and the people and the airplanes to fly on, right? If the school has a very limited airplane and they have a lot of students, that's going to be a problem. Your training is likely going to be delayed. If one airplane goes down, everybody's now piled on, on the rest of the airplanes. Or if two airplanes goes down, or three airplanes goes down, these airplanes do go on their checks on a regular basis, and those checks needs to be done. So that means the airplane is down for that period. And if they have a limited amount of airplanes, then that could be a problem. Flight student instructor ratio is important. If you have one instructor that is taking care of 10 students, and this is common, right? You have a lot of students with limited instructors, certified flight instructors. This could be a problem as well, because you don't have enough instructors to go around, which means your instructor is so busy. If you want to fly every day, you don't have the ability to do that, because the instructor needs to prioritize everybody. And this is why it is important to consider those things as well. Ask these questions: what's your student to instructor ratio, instructor to student ratio, so that you understand what that looks like. I mean, I've heard schools would have one instructor to, say, 15 students. That's a lot, especially if those students are active. Now, there are times when students are not active. There are times students are grounded for different reasons, maybe money, right? Or they're sick. Things like that will happen, but it's something to always think about before you get started. The cost, all right? Cost is important, but I already mentioned that on the previous section here. When you consider finances, okay, so I don't think we need to cover that again. But weather considerations, all right, this is a big one depending on where you're from. Some areas are prone to certain weather conditions. And if you don't think about these things, they will come as a surprise, and they generally will add to the cost of training. If you don't have the ability to fly regularly, it means that you are likely going to be spending more time just doing refresher training or doing simulator training instead of actually flying, because that's where you actually do things count, right? And of course, the type of curriculum they offer, and this is referring to, is it 61 or 141 if it's in the US, for example. On other parts of the world, they do check their curriculum, even though they don't have this 61 or 141 type training. But in the US, they offer this this structure of training. All right, these flight schools are approved for certain things, and their regulations are found in this part of the regulation, part 61, part 141. Now, 141, 61, honestly, it doesn't matter which one you choose, but think about 141 as a structured integrated program and 61 as the modular route, where you are able to pick what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it. You and your instructor get to decide on that path or that progress that you plan to follow when it comes to 61. So 61 offers that flexibility, but 141 is more structured. You have to follow a curriculum. It's almost like a university or a college, where you have to stick to the path approved by the FAA. Now, again, like I said, it's something to consider, but both of them are good depending on your situation. If you're a citizen, remember, like I said here, if you're a citizen, you may choose 61, all right? But as an international student, you may not have an option at all. You may just have to go with 141. Although you could still do a 61, they can generally switch you, depending on the school, of course. But these are things that you need to be familiar with and know what your options are. Then, of course, the training schedule. How often are they expecting you to fly? Is it every day? Is it every other day? Just generally speaking, this is something that comes down to your instructor. But some schools do have mandatory requirements on how often they expect people to fly, and that's something that you need to keep in mind. Now, generally speaking, the more you fly, the better you are. But too much of it can also lead to what they call early learning plateau, which is not good, because you're just starting something. Initially, you pick up pace, right? Because you're so excited, you're motivated. But once you start experiencing challenges, you may get to a point where you plateau. And it's always good to kind of slow down, pace yourself when that is happening, when you feel like you're not making progress. It's always good to pace yourself and, figure out what you're not getting so that you can regain that motivation, and that learning curve can continue in the right direction. By the way, if you're finding value in this video, please don't forget to drop a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe. It goes a long way. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. Now, if you're an international student, here are additional things you need to consider. You need to consider the M1 or F1 type visa that you are eligible for, right? The schools sometimes are approved for either M1. Some schools are approved for both. Some schools are approved for just F1. It all depends. So you need to know what you are entitled to, or what you can get from the school. In line with knowing the type of documents you can get or visa type you can apply for, find out about extensions, right? If you are trying to if you have any delays in training, what is the process of extending that license or extending that visa or document that you may need, right? If you're going to renew it, what is the process? You're going to change from either F1 or M1, right? M1 to F1, because this is generally the common one that comes up for a lot of people, where they want to change from M1 to F1. This can be complicated, can be expensive, and this is why it's always good to know what to expect. And of course, student exchange visitor program. All right, this is something that the immigration government, all right, the government itself, they are the ones regulating this. But through that is how the school can issue what we call an I-20. All right. And there's a website. If you just Google this, just Google ICE flight school approved, ICE approved flight schools, something like that. You will come across this website, and you can literally type in the school that you are thinking of going to. So let's say, all right, that's it right there. And you can, by the way, you don't have to do that. Even if I do go back here, and you can see the list of universities, colleges. But the important thing is you can also change to flight school. All right. And you can see a list of schools. All right. Louisiana Tech, Kent State, and these are all flight schools. And you can see they have F1, M1, F1, F1, M1, you know. So depending on the school you're applying, you want to apply to, you can literally find school options here. I don't know why it's not loading. Or you can even download the list. Something is wrong with your browser. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, you can download the list of schools that are approved. You see, download certified school list. And with that information, you're able to see what the schools offer. F1, M1, or both. All right. And then most importantly, understand your finance finance structure. Think about the structure as some schools require that you pay upfront, you pay everything. Some schools require that you pay half of it. Some schools require that you pay as you go. And some of them will even offer you discounts if you make lump sum payments, things like that. It is important that you understand what they offer. I guess I lost internet. Maybe that was why I was having an issue finding that information. But it is important that you know what the school requires when it comes to your finance structure. The other thing also is what happens when you run out of money. All right, you want to know what the school will do and how they'll handle your situation, because the last thing you want is for the school to go say cancel your documents because you ran out of money. And that's generally what they would do, especially for international students. And that's why I said, you know, being an international student does come with its own challenges, but it is definitely possible to get it done. So I don't want you to give up on that. So just to give you a quick overview of the things we covered here in this video, the biggest things, and remember, there are more things you can always consider in all of this, depending on how you want to slice it, right? There's so many things to think about, but depending on your situation, right? It always starts with your ultimate goal. It goes down to finances and choosing a school. The rest would be, you know, finding a place, family members to consider, going for your interviews if you have to do like an interview, doing an assessment. Those are things that I cover already, so I'm not going to spend too much time going over all of that in this video. I hope that you found value in this one. I wanted to share that with you. I hope to see you in my next one. Don't forget to drop a like, and of course check out my next video. I'm sure it will benefit you a lot because I try to share this valuable information to those of you that are looking to become pilots. I'll see you in the next one.